The Galactic Senate ruled against Earth. The vote was their last mistake. In a stunning reversal, Earth's hidden fleet materializes at Proxima Centauri 4, deploying gravitational lances that immobilize Senate defenses. Special forces extract Ambassador Miller, while Captain Bennett broadcasts humanity's ultimatum: reverse the unjust isolation or face Earth's full technological might. Power the arrogant Senate never suspected existed. The grand spire of the Galactic Senate rose like a silver needle against the amber sky of Proxima Centauri 4. Inside its crystalline chambers, Ambassador John Miller stood with perfect posture, his weathered face betraying nothing of the turmoil within. 100 years after humanity had joined the Galactic Union, Earth faced its greatest diplomatic crisis. Miller's gaze swept across the vast amphitheater. 917 delegates from across the galaxy sat in concentric rings, their varied anatomies a testament to the diversity of sentient life. The Draconians occupied the prestigious inner circle, their scaled skin gleaming under the chamber's soft light. Archduke Vex, their leader, met Miller's eyes with a cold smile that didn't reach his vertical pupils. Back on Earth, citizens gathered around public screens in every major city. At Star Command headquarters in Washington, D.C., Defense Secretary Lisa Howard paced the Situation Room, her expression grim as she monitored the proceedings. The stakes couldn't be higher. "The evidence is irrefutable," the Grand Speaker's voice boomed through the chamber, the translation matrices converting his musical Centaurian speech into standard Galactic. Earth has violated Protocol 47b by developing forbidden quantum displacement technology and concealing information from this august body. Miller's mind raced. The so-called evidence had been fabricated. He was certain the Draconian Empire had manipulated the findings. For years, they had viewed humanity's rapid advancement as a threat to their 3 millennia dominance. The delegation from Earth has been given ample opportunity to refute these claims. The Grand Speaker continued. As they have failed to do so satisfactorily, we shall proceed to vote on the proposed isolation sanction. Miller had spent months lobbying individual senators, calling in favors, explaining Earth's position. Now it all came down to this moment. The voting commenced. Each delegate's decision projected onto the massive holographic display suspended above the chamber. Green for support of Earth, red for condemnation, white for abstention. Red lights bloomed across the display like a spreading infection. "The results are tallied," the Grand Speaker announced. "With 94 votes for sanction, 23 abstentions, and 0 votes against sanction, this body hereby imposes isolation protocol on the planet Earth and all its colonies. All interstellar travel to and from Earth space is prohibited. All diplomatic missions are recalled. All trade agreements are suspended. This isolation will remain in effect for no less than 50 standard years." Miller maintained his composure, even as rage threatened to overwhelm him. They had just sentenced humanity to a half-century of isolation, potentially destroying Earth's economy and technological development. Behind him, his aide gasped audibly. Without a word, Miller reached into his pocket and pressed a small device 3 times in rapid succession. The Lazarus code had been activated. On Earth, Lisa Howard's secure terminal chimed. The message contained just 2 words. They voted. She turned to her staff. "Assemble the Strategic Council, now." In the Senate chamber, Miller bowed formally to the Grand Speaker. "The delegation of Earth acknowledges this body's decision," he said, his voice steady. "We request safe passage back to our homeworld." "Granted," the Grand Speaker replied. "You have 48 hours to depart Proxima Centauri 4. As Miller turned to leave, Archduke Vex approached, his reptilian gait smooth and predatory. "Such a shame, Ambassador," Vex said, his voice a silky whisper. "Perhaps in 50 years, your species will have learned its proper place in the galactic order." Miller smiled thinly. "Perhaps, Archduke. The future often holds surprises. On the dark side of Earth's moon, in chambers carved deep beneath the lunar regolith, automated systems hum to life. 50 warships, hidden for decades, began powering up their Helios drives. The vessels had been constructed in absolute secrecy, using resources diverted through shell corporations and black-budget projects. Even most of Earth's government remained unaware of their existence. Admiral Takahashi walked through the main hangar of Moonbase Alpha, watching as crew members rushed to their stations. The Luna fleet represented the pinnacle of human military technology, technology far beyond what Earth had shared with the Galactic Union. "Status report," he barked into his comm. "All ships at 90% readiness." "Admiral," came the prompt reply. "Defiance is fully operational and awaiting your command." "Excellent. Prepare for departure in 24 hours. Meanwhile, at the Jupiter Defense Platform, Commander Elena Rodriguez reviewed the early warning systems. The massive gas giant's magnetic field provided ideal cover for the installations hidden among its 67 moons. If the Galactic Union attempted to enforce their isolation by sending ships to Earth, they would meet an unexpected reception. "All defense grids online," her lieutenant reported. "Intercept systems ready." Beneath Earth's oceans, deserts, and hollow mountains, 12 massive shield generators hummed with potential energy. The planetary defense system had been designed to create an impenetrable barrier around the entire planet, a technology the Senate believed was centuries beyond human capability. In Washington, the Strategic Council convened in a secure underground facility. Lisa Howard stood before the assembled military and civilian leaders, including President Richard Mason. "The Senate has voted for isolation," she announced. "Ambassador Miller has activated the Lazarus Protocol." The room remained silent as the implications sank in. "How long until the enforcement fleet arrives?" President Mason asked. "Intelligence suggests 3 days," Howard replied. "They'll establish a blockade and likely place monitoring satellites throughout the system." "And our assets?" "Luna fleet will be ready in 24 hours. Jupiter Defense is operational. The Earth shield can be activated on your command." Mason nodded grimly. "And our intelligence network?" Howard turned to a screen where a secure transmission was connecting. The face of Ben White appeared, his features partially obscured by the poor quality of the transmission. A necessary security precaution. "Report, Agent White," Howard commanded. "I've secured the defense grid schematics and communication protocols," White said. His voice was strained. He'd been embedded in the Galactic Library for 3 years, posing as a junior archivist while gathering critical intelligence. "The Senate's enforcement fleet consists of 30 vessels, primarily Centaurian and Draconian. Their defensive capabilities are significant, but not insurmountable." "Vulnerabilities?" Mason asked. "Their communication relies on quantum entanglement nodes. If we can disrupt those, their coordination will collapse." White glanced over his shoulder nervously. "I've uploaded the encryption keys to our secure server. I recommend immediate extraction." "Extraction team is en route," Howard assured him. "Hold position for 12 more hours." As the transmission ended, Mason turned to the assembled council. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have prepared for this day for decades. Operation Defiance is now in effect. Deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, in a facility known only to a select few, the Advanced Combat Division prepared for deployment. 500 soldiers trained in zero-gravity combat and equipped with personal cloaking suits stood ready. Their commander, Colonel Sarah Chang, addressed her troops. "The Senate has chosen to isolate Earth," she said, her voice echoing through the cavernous chamber. "Our mission is to ensure that decision is reversed, by diplomacy if possible, by force if necessary." On the diplomatic front, Ambassador Susan Wright worked tirelessly from her office on Epsilon Eridani. As Earth's representative to the neutral worlds, she had spent years building relationships with civilizations that remained outside the Galactic Union's influence. The evidence against Earth was fabricated, she explained to the Aerodani Council. The Draconian Empire fears our advancement and has manipulated the Senate to contain us. The Aerodani Eldest, a being of pure energy contained within a crystalline matrix, pulsed thoughtfully. We have suspected draconian manipulation for some time. What do you propose, Ambassador? A new alliance, Wright replied. One based on equality and mutual respect, not the hierarchical structure the Draconians have imposed on the Union. Similar conversations were occurring on Tidy and among the Frontier Collective, civilizations that had reason to distrust the ancient powers that dominated the Senate. Back on Earth, final preparations were underway. In the war room at Star Command, holographic displays showed the positions of every known Galactic Union vessel. Intelligence suggested that the enforcement fleet would arrive through the Alpha Centauri hyperspace junction in approximately 60 hours. We need to move before they establish the blockade, Howard argued. Once their monitoring systems are in place, we lose the element of surprise. Mason nodded. Agreed. Admiral Takahashi, prepare the Luna fleet for immediate deployment. Target, Proxima Centauri 4. Mr. President, one of the advisors interrupted. That's a direct assault on the Galactic Senate. It could be perceived as an act of war. They've already declared war on us, Mason replied firmly. They just don't know it yet. As the Defiance and 9 escort vessels prepared to depart from Moonbase Alpha, Captain Olivia Bennett addressed her bridge crew. Our mission is precise and limited, she explained, her voice steady despite the gravity of what they were about to undertake. We will secure the Senate chamber, extract our diplomatic personnel, and deliver a message. Minimal casualties. Maximum impact. The ship's Helios drives hummed with power, a propulsion system that allowed for instantaneous travel without using the established hyperspace junctions monitored by the Union. Another technology humanity had kept secret. All ships report ready, Captain, her first officer announced. Bennett nodded. Execute jump in 3, 2, 1. In a flash of golden light, the 10 vessels vanished from lunar orbit. In the Galactic Senate, proceedings continued as delegates debated the implementation of Earth's isolation. Ambassador Miller sat in dignified silence, observing the political maneuvering that followed the momentous vote. Many senators who had voted against Earth now sought favorable positions in the new power structure. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the chamber. The massive holographic display shifted to show 10 unidentified vessels materializing directly behind the Senate's defensive perimeter. Security breach, a Draconian officer shouted. Unknown vessels have bypassed our outer defenses. Before the Senate's defense fleet could respond, the human vessels fired, not with conventional weapons, but with gravitic lances, focused beams that manipulated gravitational fields. 7 patrol ships suddenly found themselves unable to maneuver, caught in artificial gravity wells that rendered them effectively immobile. Commander Ze, the Centaurian in charge of Senate security, barked orders to his remaining forces. Intercept those vessels. All available ships converge on the intruders. In the Senate chamber, panic erupted as delegates realized they were under attack. The Grand Speaker called for order, but his voice was lost in the chaos. Archduke Vex approached Miller, rage contorting his reptilian features. "What have you done?" he hissed. Miller smiled. "I believe, Archduke, that Earth is lodging a formal protest against the Senate's ruling." Outside, in the space surrounding Proxima Centauri 4, the Defiance deployed 20 smaller craft. Each contained a squad of Earth's special forces, their ships and suits equipped with cloaking technology that rendered them invisible to Senate sensors. Colonel Chang led her team directly to the diplomatic tower, where Earth's embassy was located. Using access codes provided by Miller, they bypassed security and neutralized the guards with non-lethal stun weapons. "Ambassador," Chang said as her team secured Miller and his staff. "We have extraction vessels standing by. Please come with us." Miller nodded calmly. as though being rescued by cloaked special forces during a space battle was an everyday occurrence. "Of course, Colonel. But first, I have a message to deliver." In orbit, Captain Bennett's voice echoed through every communication channel in the Proxima Centauri system. "Attention Galactic Senate and Defense Forces. This is Captain Olivia Bennett of the Earth vessel Defiance. You have committed an act of aggression against Earth by imposing unjust isolation based on fabricated evidence. We are extracting our diplomatic personnel. Any attempt to interfere will be met with overwhelming force." To emphasize her point, the Defiance fired another gravitic lance, immobilizing a Draconian cruiser that had attempted to intercept one of the extraction vessels. "We recommend you stand down," Bennett continued. "This demonstration represents a fraction of Earth's capabilities. We have no desire for conflict, but we will not submit to unjust punishment." In the Senate chamber, Miller stood before the Grand Speaker, surrounded by Chang's cloaked soldiers, visible now, as they had deactivated their camouflage to make a point. "The delegation of Earth rejects this body's ruling," Miller announced, his voice carrying through the stunned silence. "The evidence presented against us was falsified by the Draconian Empire for their own political purposes." Murmurs spread through the chamber as delegates processed this bold claim, and the even bolder military action backing it. "You have no proof," Archduke Vex snarled. "On the contrary," Miller replied, nodding to one of Chang's officers who projected a holographic display. "These are communications between your military intelligence division and the scientists who presented evidence against Earth. They detail exactly how the evidence was manipulated." The Grand Speaker examined the data, his compound eyes blinking rapidly. "These are serious accusations, Ambassador Miller. However, your military action against this Senate is unprecedented and unacceptable, as is condemning an entire civilization based on falsified evidence." Miller countered. "Earth proposes an alternative, an independent investigation into the charges against us, conducted by neutral parties. Until then, we will take measures to ensure our security." With that, Miller turned and walked out of the chamber, escorted by Chang's forces. No one attempted to stop them. As the extraction vessels returned to the Defiance and her escort ships, Captain Bennett received new orders from Earth. "Phase 2 authorized," the encrypted message read. "All ships, prepare for secondary jumps," Bennett commanded. "Target coordinates received." In another flash of golden light, the Earth fleet vanished, only to reappear at strategic locations throughout the galaxy. Their targets, the 5 major hyperspace junctions that connected the core worlds of the Galactic Union. At each junction, the Earth vessels deployed specialized devices that gave them control over the ancient technology that made interstellar travel possible. Within hours, Earth effectively controlled the flow of traffic between the most powerful worlds in the galaxy. On Epsilon Aerodani, Ambassador Wright convened a meeting with 30 representatives from neutral worlds. The news of Earth's bold action had spread quickly through the galaxy. "What Earth has demonstrated today is not aggression," Wright explained to the assembled delegates. "It is a rejection of a system that allows ancient powers to manipulate justice for their own ends." The Tiety ambassador, a methane-breathing entity encased in an environmental suit, leaned forward. "The Senate's power has gone unchallenged for millennia. Your actions will have consequences." "We're counting on it," Wright replied. "Earth proposes a new alliance, the Free Worlds Coalition, an organization based on equality, where each world has one vote, regardless of how long they've been spacefaring or how many planets they control." The idea resonated with many present. For too long, the ancient civilizations like the Draconians had dominated galactic politics, treating younger spacefaring races as second-class citizens. As these diplomatic initiatives unfolded, Earth's defense forces remained on high alert. In the command center beneath Washington, President Mason and Secretary Howard monitored the situation closely. The Draconian home fleet has mobilized, an intelligence officer reported. They're attempting to reach the Proxima Junction, but our forces are maintaining control. And the other major powers? Mason asked. The Centaurians are calling for negotiations. The Rigelian Concordat has declared neutrality. The smaller Senate members are awaiting developments. Howard studied a different display, her expression troubled. Mr. President, we're detecting unusual activity at the edge of the galaxy. Long-range sensors are picking up energy signatures that don't match any known civilization. Mason frowned. Show me. The display shifted to show the outer reaches of the Milky Way. Faint energy readings indicated something massive, moving slowly toward the galaxy's populous regions. What are we looking at? Mason asked. Unknown, sir, Howard replied. But whatever it is, it's big and it's coming from Andromeda. The revelation added urgency to Earth's diplomatic efforts. If a new threat was emerging from the neighboring galaxy, internal conflicts would only weaken the Milky Way's ability to respond. Over the next several days, a flurry of diplomatic activity occurred across the galaxy. The Galactic Senate, cut off from its enforcement capabilities by Earth's control of the hyperspace junctions, had little choice but to negotiate. In a secure, neutral location on Teidi, representatives from Earth, the major Senate powers, and the newly formed Free Worlds Coalition met to determine the galaxy's future. The current structure of the Galactic Union is unsustainable, Miller argued. A system where ancient powers hold permanent advantage over younger civilizations cannot produce true justice. You speak of justice while holding a gun to our heads, Archduke Vex retorted. Your control of the hyperspace junctions is nothing short of extortion. We control the junctions to ensure fair negotiations, Miller replied calmly. Once a new framework is established, control will be transferred to a representative body with delegates from all worlds. The negotiations were tense, with centuries of political tradition being challenged. But Earth's military demonstration had made one thing clear. The old power structure could no longer be maintained by force. After 7 days of intensive talks, a new framework emerged. The Galactic Senate would be dissolved, replaced by the United Galactic Alliance. Each world would have a single vote, regardless of its age or power. Decisions would require a 2/3 majority, preventing the dominant blocs that had characterized the old Senate. On Proxima Centauri 4, in the very chamber where Earth had been condemned to isolation, President Richard Mason addressed the gathered representatives of 300 worlds. Today marks a new beginning for our galaxy, he declared. Not a human dominance, as some have feared, but a true partnership among equals. The challenges we face require unity, not the false unity of submission to ancient powers, but the genuine unity that comes from mutual respect and shared purpose. As Mason spoke, images of the Andromeda energy signatures were shared with the assembled delegates. The potential threat from outside the galaxy sobered even the most reluctant participants in the new alliance. Earth did not reveal its full capabilities out of aggression, Mason continued. We developed in secret because we recognized the inequality in the system. Now, we offer these technologies, the Helios drive, the gravitational lance, planetary shielding, to be shared among all members of the new alliance. The offer sent a ripple of astonishment through the chamber. These technologies represented significant advantages, and Earth was voluntarily sharing them. In return, Mason concluded, we ask only for true partnership as we prepare to face whatever comes from beyond our galaxy. Together. The ratification of the new alliance treaty was nearly unanimous. Even the Draconian Empire, recognizing the shifting balance of power, added their signature, though Archduke Vex did so with barely concealed resentment. As the ceremony concluded, Miller approached the Archduke. A new era, Your Excellency. I trust we can work together despite our differences. Vex's eyes narrowed. Do not mistake political necessity for acceptance, Ambassador. This humiliation will not be forgotten. Miller nodded. Nor should it be. But perhaps it can be instructive. The future belongs to those who adapt. In the weeks that followed, the practical implementation of the new alliance began. Earth ships relinquished control of the hyperspace junctions to multinational forces. Technology exchange programs were established. Defense strategies against the potential Andromeda threat were developed. At Star Command headquarters, now serving as the temporary center for the United Galactic Alliance's defense coordination, Captain Bennett, newly promoted to Admiral, oversaw the integration of Earth's fleet with those of other worlds. The Centaurian ships have compatible communication systems, she explained to a mixed group of officers from a dozen worlds. The Rigelian vessels will require adaptation modules. As for the Draconian warships, she paused as a Draconian commander entered the room. He saluted stiffly. Admiral Bennett, Commander Traz reporting as ordered. My ships await your instruction. Bennett returned the salute. Welcome, Commander. We were just discussing integration protocols for the combined fleet. The scene was repeating across the galaxy as former adversaries began the difficult process of learning to work together. Not all transitions were smooth. Centuries of prejudice and suspicion could not be erased overnight. But the common purpose provided powerful motivation. On the diplomatic front, Ambassador Wright continued to strengthen relationships with formerly neutral worlds, many of which were now applying for membership in the new alliance. The response has been overwhelming, she reported to President Mason during a secure communication. Worlds that remained outside the Senate's influence for fear of domination now see the alliance as a genuine opportunity for equal partnership. Mason nodded approvingly. And the former Senate powers? How are they adjusting to their new status? The Centaurians have embraced the change wholeheartedly, Wright replied. The Rigelians are pragmatic. They recognize the advantages of the new arrangement. The Draconians. She hesitated. They're complying outwardly, but intelligence suggests internal resistance. Archduke Vex's position has been weakened by what some perceive as a humiliating defeat. Keep a close eye on them, Mason instructed. We don't need internal sabotage while facing a potential external threat. The Andromeda situation remained the most pressing concern. Long-range probes dispatched to the galaxy's edge transmitted increasingly detailed information about the approaching entities. They appeared to be massive vessels, unlike any known design, moving with purpose toward the Milky Way. In a secure facility beneath the Rocky Mountains, scientists and military analysts from across the Alliance studied the data. Dr. Elizabeth Chen, Earth's leading xenobiologist, led the research team. The energy signatures suggest a biological component to their technology, she explained during a briefing. These aren't simply mechanical constructs. They're partially organic, or perhaps a true biosynthetic integration. Hostile? Asked a Rigelian general. Unknown, Chen admitted. But their approach vector takes them directly toward populated sectors, and their velocity has increased since our first detection, suggesting purposeful acceleration. The Alliance's newly formed High Council authorized the deployment of a reconnaissance mission to the galaxy's edge. A small fleet of the fastest vessels, equipped with the best stealth technology available, would approach the Andromeda entities and gather more detailed information. Admiral Bennett volunteered to lead the mission personally. The Defiance was designed for deep space reconnaissance, she argued. And I have experience with first contact situations. The Council approved her request, and within days, the Defiance led a mixed fleet of 12 vessels toward the edge of the Milky Way. The journey would take weeks, even with the advanced propulsion systems now shared throughout the Alliance. As the reconnaissance fleet departed, Earth continued to adjust to its new role in galactic politics. For a century, humanity had been the newcomers, tolerated but rarely respected by the ancient civilizations that dominated the Senate. Now, Earth stood as an equal partner, its hidden strengths revealed and its diplomatic influence greatly expanded. In Washington, Lisa Howard, met with a delegation from the Frontier Collective, worlds at the galaxy's edge that had experienced the first hints of the Andromeda approach. "Our long-range sensors detected them nearly a year ago," explained the collective's representative, "a silicon-based lifeform named Kazut. But the Senate dismissed our reports as exaggeration or misinterpretation. That won't happen with the Alliance," Howard assured them. "Every world's concerns are given equal consideration now." The shift in power dynamics continued to reverberate across the galaxy. On Draconis Prime, internal politics had turned volatile. Archduke Vex faced mounting criticism for his handling of the Earth situation. Centuries of draconian dominance had been upended in a matter of days, and conservative factions within the Empire blamed Vex's aggressive tactics for provoking Earth's response. In a palatial chamber deep within the Imperial Citadel, Vex met with his closest advisors. "The humiliation is temporary," he insisted. "Earth has overextended itself. When the Andromeda threat proves to be insignificant, as I suspect it will, their position will weaken." "And if the threat is real?" asked High Strategist Mach, her scales darkening with concern. "Then we cooperate until the danger passes," Vex replied. "And afterward, we reassess our position." The political calculations occurring on Draconis Prime were mirrored across many worlds as the galaxy's power structures adjusted to the new reality. Some embraced the change enthusiastically, seeing opportunity in the more egalitarian system. Others, particularly those who had benefited from the old hierarchies, sought ways to preserve their advantages within the new framework. Meanwhile, Admiral Bennett's reconnaissance fleet approached the coordinates where the Andromeda entities had last been detected. The Defiance led the formation, its advanced sensors probing the seemingly empty space ahead. "Anything, Lieutenant?" Bennett asked her sensor officer. "Nothing yet, Admiral," the officer replied, frowning at his displays. "Wait. Energy spike at coordinates 227 Mark 84. The main view screen shifted to show a patch of space that appeared empty at first glance. As they watched, a distortion appeared, like heat haze on a summer day, but spanning thousands of kilometers. "Full stop," Bennett ordered. "All ships hold position." The distortion grew more pronounced, and then, with a flash of exotic radiation that momentarily blinded their sensors, a massive object appeared. It resembled a crystalline structure the size of a small moon, its surface covered with formations that might have been technology or might have been organic growth, or something in between. "Magnify," Bennett commanded, her voice steady despite the awesome sight before them. The view screen zoomed in on a section of the entity's surface. What had appeared to be random patterns now resolved into complex structures that pulsed with internal light, giving the impression of a vast, technology-infused circulatory system. "Are they detecting us?" Bennett asked. "Unknown," her science officer replied. "Our stealth systems are fully engaged, but their technology is unlike anything in our database." Bennett made a decision. "Maintain position. Passive scans only. Let's observe before making any moves that might be perceived as aggressive." For hours, the reconnaissance fleet watched as more entities emerged from the spatial distortion, 12 in total, each as massive as the first. They arranged themselves in a geometric pattern and appeared to be communicating via pulses of energy that defied analysis. "Record everything," Bennett instructed. "We need to get this data back to Alliance headquarters." As they observed, one of the entities suddenly emitted a broad-spectrum energy pulse that washed over the hidden fleet. Alarm signals blared on the Defiance's bridge. "They've detected us," the tactical officer reported tensely. "Energy levels are rising across all entities." Bennett didn't hesitate. "Send the emergency data packet to Alliance headquarters. Prepare for emergency jump." Before they could execute the jump, a focused beam of energy lanced out from the nearest entity, enveloping the Defiance in coruscating light. Instead of damage, however, the ship's communication systems activated independently. A voice, or something approximating a voice, echoed through the bridge, speaking in perfect standard Galactic despite never having encountered it before. "We recognize your pattern," the voice said. "You are not the Shapers, yet you occupy their domain. Explain." Bennett glanced at her communications officer, who nodded to indicate that a channel was open. "This is Admiral Olivia Bennett of the United Galactic Alliance vessel Defiance. We are a reconnaissance mission from the Milky Way galaxy. We detected your approach and came to establish contact." There was a pause, as though the entities were conferring. Then, "The domain designates itself differently now. Interesting. We come seeking the Shapers, who seeded this domain and others. Their pattern is fading. Where are they?" Bennett looked to her science officer in confusion. The officer shrugged helplessly. None of this aligned with any known galactic history. "I'm afraid we don't know who the Shapers are," Bennett replied honestly. "Our alliance represents the known civilizations of this galaxy. Some are ancient, tens of thousands of years of recorded history, but we have no record of these Shapers." Another pause. Longer this time. "This is unexpected. The Shapers' pattern should persist. Unless—" The voice trailed off, then returned with a different tone. "We must consult the aggregate. You will remain. Do not approach closer." With that, the communication ended. The energy beam retracted, and the entities resumed their geometric formation, pulses of light passing between them at accelerated rates. "Admiral," the science officer said quietly, "I believe we've just made first contact with a civilization far more advanced than anything in the Alliance. Possibly more advanced than anything we've ever encountered." Bennett nodded grimly. "And they're looking for someone who isn't here anymore. I don't like the implications." She turned to her communications officer. "Send a full report to Alliance headquarters. Include all sensor data and the communication transcript. Request instructions." The data packet was transmitted via the Helios communication system, another technology Earth had kept secret until recently. Unlike conventional communications that relied on the hyperspace network, Helios communications were instantaneous across any distance. At Alliance headquarters, the High Council convened an emergency session to review the reconnaissance data. Representatives from 30 worlds, the executive committee of the larger assembly, gathered in a secure chamber deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. President Mason studied the holographic representation of the Andromeda entities with growing concern. "Dr. Chen, your analysis." The xenobiologist gestured, and the display zoomed in on the structural details. "These patterns suggest a technology that integrates biological components at a fundamental level. Not cybernetics as we understand it, but a true synthesis where the distinction between organism and machine becomes meaningless." "And their capabilities?" asked the Centaurian delegate. "Beyond our comprehension," Chen admitted. "The energy readings alone indicate power generation orders of magnitude beyond our most advanced systems, and they detected our stealth fleet effortlessly, despite technologies that should have rendered it invisible to any known sensor systems." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The galaxy had just encountered a civilization that made even the most ancient Senate powers look primitive by comparison. "What about these Shapers they mentioned?" the Rigelian representative inquired. "Unknown," Mason replied. "We're searching all archaeological and historical records, but so far, nothing matches their description." "Perhaps," suggested Ambassador Miller, who had been invited to join the council for this session, "we should consider the possibility that the Shapers predate all our civilizations. If these entities are as advanced as they appear, they may be referring to events that occurred millions of years ago." The council debated their response strategy for hours. Some advocated for a defensive posture, marshaling the Alliance's military forces and preparing for possible conflict. Others argued for continued diplomatic engagement, attempting to understand the entity's purpose and find common ground. We need more information before committing to either approach. Mason finally concluded. I propose we authorize Admiral Bennett to continue communication while maintaining a safe distance. Meanwhile, we accelerate the integration of our defense systems and continue searching for any record of these shapers. The Council approved the plan, and new orders were transmitted to the Defiance. For 3 days, Bennett's fleet maintained its position, observing the Andromeda entities as they continued their mysterious communications. Then, without warning, one of the entities detached from the formation and approached the Defiance. "Hold position," Bennett ordered as tension filled the bridge. "No aggressive actions." The entity stopped at a distance of 10,000 kilometers, close by astronomical standards. Once again, the energy beam connected with the Defiance, and the strange voice returned. "We have consulted the aggregate," it announced. "Your domain has changed more than anticipated. The Shaper's work has evolved beyond their original parameters. This is unexpected, but not unprecedented." Bennett chose her words carefully. "We would like to understand your purpose here. Are you seeking these Shapers for a specific reason?" "The Shapers seeded this domain and others with the foundations of life," the voice explained. "They established the parameters for evolution and development. It was their purpose to return and evaluate the results. We are the custodians, tasked with maintaining the domains in their absence." "And now you've come to evaluate us?" Bennett asked. "That was not our purpose," the voice replied. "We detected a fading of the Shaper's pattern. We came to investigate. Now we find a domain that has developed independently, without guidance. This requires assessment." The implications were staggering. These entities, these custodians, were suggesting that some precursor civilization had seeded the galaxy with the building blocks of life, essentially engineering the conditions for evolution across countless worlds. "What form will this assessment take?" Bennett inquired, keeping her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "We must determine if the domain's current state aligns with the Shaper's intentions." The custodian responded. "We will observe your civilizations, analyze your development patterns, and consult the templates." "Will this observation be peaceful?" Bennett pressed. "We have just established a new alliance among our worlds. We hope for peaceful relations with your custodians as well." There was a pause before the response came. "Peaceful observation is our standard protocol. However, if we determine that the domain has developed along prohibited pathways, intervention may be necessary." With that ominous statement, the communication ended. The entity rejoined its companions, and the entire formation began moving slowly toward the galaxy's more populated regions. Bennett immediately reported the conversation to Alliance headquarters. The High Council reconvened to address this new development, a potential existential threat to all civilizations in the Milky Way. "They're coming to judge us," Ambassador Wright said, summarizing the situation starkly. "Against standards we know nothing about, set by beings who apparently engineered the conditions for our existence in the first place." "And if we're found wanting?" the Tati representative asked. No one had an answer, but the implications were clear. A civilization capable of seeding life throughout a galaxy would have little difficulty reshaping or even destroying that life if they, or their custodians, deemed it necessary. "We need to present a united front," President Mason declared. "Whatever these custodians are looking for, our best chance lies in demonstrating that our civilizations can work together despite our differences." Even Archduke Vex, who had remained skeptical of the alliance, now recognized the gravity of the situation. "The Draconian Empire will contribute all necessary resources to this united effort," he announced. "Our disagreements are insignificant compared to this judgment." Over the following weeks, the Alliance prepared for the custodians' arrival in populated space. Information was shared openly among member worlds. Defense systems were integrated. Cultural and scientific exchanges accelerated as the diverse civilizations of the Milky Way sought to understand one another better and present their best collective face to the approaching entities. Archaeological teams on 100 worlds searched desperately for any mention of the Shapers in ancient records. On Earth, in the Mesopotamian basin, a breakthrough occurred when researchers discovered tablets predating known Sumerian civilization by thousands of years, bearing symbols that matched patterns observed on the custodian entities. Similar discoveries soon followed on other worlds, ancient artifacts with consistent symbology, all dating to the earliest periods of each planet's recorded history. The evidence suggested that the Shapers had indeed visited the galaxy in the distant past, leaving subtle markers of their presence. Dr. Chen led the effort to decipher these artifacts, working with archaeologists and linguists from dozens of species. The symbols appear to represent some form of instruction set, she explained during a council briefing. Not a language as we understand it, but a programmatic directive, almost like code written into the fabric of our earliest civilizations. What kind of instructions? Mason asked. We're still working on a complete translation, Chen replied. But preliminary analysis suggests they describe developmental pathways, guidelines for how civilizations should evolve. And have we followed these guidelines? Miller inquired. Chen hesitated. That's the troubling part. If our translations are correct, the instructions emphasize harmony with natural systems, gradual technological development, and cooperation between species. Many of our civilizations have developed along different lines. The implication hung heavily in the council chamber. If the custodians were coming to evaluate adherence to the Shapers' instructions, many worlds might be found wanting. As the Alliance grappled with these revelations, the custodian entities continued their approach. They had entered the Outer Rim sectors, moving slowly, but inexorably, toward the galaxy's core. Worlds in their path reported no hostile actions, just intense scanning and occasional communications requesting historical and cultural data. Admiral Bennett's fleet maintained a respectful distance, observing the custodians, while serving as the Alliance's primary communication channel. Through these exchanges, a clearer picture of the custodians' nature and purpose emerged. They were indeed a synthetic organic hybrid, created by the Shapers millions of years ago to monitor the progress of their seeded worlds. The Shapers themselves had apparently departed the known universe eons ago, leaving the custodians to maintain their work across multiple galaxies. Our primary directive is preservation, the custodian explained during one exchange. The Shapers intended their seeded domains to develop along specific paths. Deviations are evaluated for potential correction. And what constitutes a deviation requiring correction? Bennett asked carefully. Patterns that threaten the viability of the domain, came the reply. Unchecked expansion, resource depletion, technological development that outpaces ethical frameworks, domination of diverse evolutionary paths by a single pattern. Bennett recognized descriptions of behaviors that characterized many periods of galactic history, including the recent dominance of ancient powers in the Senate system. We have recently reformed our political structures, she explained. Our alliance now emphasizes equality among all worlds and species. We're working to address resource management and technological ethics as well. We have observed this restructuring, the custodian acknowledged. It represents a potential course correction. However, assessment must consider the full developmental history and likely future trajectories. As the custodians approached the core worlds, Alliance leaders prepared for a formal meeting. The massive central plaza on Proxima Centauri 4, once the exclusive domain of the Galactic Senate, had been repurposed as the headquarters for the United Galactic Alliance. Here, representatives from every member world would gather to receive the custodians' delegation. President Mason arrived with a mixed entourage of human and alien advisors, symbolizing Earth's commitment to the new cooperative approach. Ambassador Miller stood at his side, along with Secretary Howard and Dr. Chen, whose expertise in deciphering the Shaper artifacts had proven invaluable. Archduke Vex arrived separately, accompanied by Draconian officials. Though technically part of the Alliance now, the Draconians maintained a distinct identity. Vex approached the Earth delegation with careful formality. "President Mason," he greeted, "it seems our disagreement has been overshadowed by greater concerns." "Indeed, Archduke," Mason replied. "I trust we can present a united front to our visitors." Vex's vertical pupils narrowed slightly. "Of course, the survival of all our civilizations may depend on it." The central plaza had been adapted to accommodate the expected custodian representative. Since the entities themselves were massive structures the size of small moons, they would remain in orbit. However, they had indicated they would send a smaller proxy for direct interaction. At the appointed time, a beam of light lanced down from the sky, coalescing into a crystalline form approximately 3 meters tall. It pulsed with the same internal luminescence observed in the larger entities, giving the impression of a living circuit made manifest. The assembled representatives fell silent as the custodian proxy moved to the center of the plaza. Its voice, when it spoke, seemed to emanate not from the crystal structure, but from the air around it, as though space itself was being used as a medium. "We greet the developed intelligences of this domain," it began. "I am Nexus, a partition of the Custodian Collective, authorized to conduct preliminary assessment and communication." President Mason stepped forward as the designated speaker for the Alliance. "On behalf of all worlds in the United Galactic Alliance, I welcome you to Proxima Centauri 4. We are eager to learn more about your purpose here and the Shapers who you serve." "Purpose is assessment," Nexus replied. "The Shapers established parameters for development in this domain 2.7 billion cycles ago. They departed this universe shortly thereafter, leaving instructions for periodic evaluation. We have detected a fading of their pattern across multiple domains, necessitating comprehensive review. We have discovered artifacts we believe were left by these Shapers," Mason said, gesturing to Dr. Chen, who displayed holographic representations of the ancient symbols found on various worlds. "We're still working to understand their significance." Nexus examined the displays, pulses of light moving more rapidly through its crystalline form. "These are directive markers," it confirmed. "Basic guideline encodings left at developmental inception points. Their preservation is noteworthy." "Can you help us understand what they mean?" Chen asked, stepping forward. "We've made progress in translation, but much remains unclear." "Translation is permitted," Nexus agreed. "However, understanding the full context requires historical baseline comparison." Over the next several hours, Nexus shared information about the Shapers and their work across multiple galaxies. The assembled representatives learned that the Milky Way was one of hundreds of seeded domains, each established with slightly different parameters to explore various evolutionary pathways. The Shapers sought understanding of all possible development patterns, Nexus explained. Each domain represents a unique experiment in emergent complexity. "And what happens if a domain's development is deemed unsuccessful?" Archduke Vex asked, voicing the question many were afraid to pose. Nexus's lights pulsed in a pattern they had come to recognize as consideration. "Historically, significant deviations have resulted in adjustments to restore intended parameters. In extreme cases, reset and reseeding has occurred." The implication sent a chill through the assembly. Reset could only mean one thing: the elimination of existing civilizations to start the experiment anew. "How do you determine whether adjustment or reset is warranted?" Mason asked carefully. "Assessment considers multiple factors," Nexus replied. "Primary among them is the domain's trajectory toward harmony or discord, creation or destruction, diversity or homogeneity. Secondary considerations include resource management, technological application, and treatment of emergent intelligences." As the exchange continued, it became clear that the custodians operated on timescales and with perspectives vastly different from even the oldest civilizations in the Alliance. To them, the rise and fall of empires were merely data points in a billions-year experiment. When the formal meeting concluded, Alliance leaders gathered to discuss their situation. The mood was somber as they considered the implications of being essentially a laboratory experiment, subject to evaluation and possible reset by entities wielding incomprehensible power. "We need to demonstrate that our experiment is worth continuing," Miller argued. The new alliance structure aligns with many of the values Nexus described: diversity, cooperation, balanced development. But our history doesn't, Howard pointed out. The draconian dominance of the Senate, the resource exploitation of colonial periods, the numerous interstellar conflicts, all could be seen as deviations from their parameters. "Then, we emphasize our capacity for correction," Mason said firmly. "We show them that we can recognize our mistakes and change course. That's what the Alliance represents, a self-correction mechanism for our civilizations." In the days that followed, representatives from across the Alliance worked to compile evidence of positive development, examples of cooperation, sustainable practices, ethical applications of technology, and cultural preservation. Meanwhile, Nexus and other custodian proxies visited key worlds, observing and collecting data for their assessment. On Earth, Nexus examined the planet's recovery from its environmental crisis of the 21st century. The Great Restoration of the 2100s had reversed much of the damage, rehabilitating ecosystems and establishing a sustainable balance between technological civilization and natural systems. "Adaptation and correction noted," Nexus commented as it observed the restored Amazon basin. Now, a thriving ecosystem integrated with carbon-neutral human settlements. Self-recognition of destructive patterns is significant. Similar assessments occurred across Alliance worlds, with custodian proxies examining everything from governance structures to artistic expressions, from technological applications to interspecies relationships. The process continued for months, creating a constant undercurrent of tension throughout the Alliance. The custodian entities remained in orbit around key worlds, their massive forms visible in the night skies, a constant reminder of judgment pending. During this period, the internal cohesion of the Alliance was tested repeatedly. Ancient rivalries and prejudices threatened to resurface under the stress. Yet, paradoxically, the external scrutiny served to strengthen the bonds between member worlds. The shared experience of evaluation created a sense of solidarity that transcended historical divisions. Even the Draconians, long accustomed to dominance, found themselves genuinely cooperating with former subordinates. Archduke Vex, in a private meeting with President Mason, admitted as much. "I would never have believed it," he said. His reptilian features set in what humans had learned to recognize as thoughtful contemplation. But there is efficiency in this arrangement. When expertise and resources are shared freely, all benefit. Mason nodded. "That's the foundation of the Alliance, the recognition that our diversity is a strength when we cooperate rather than compete." "A Draconian would say that sounds like weakness," Vex replied. "But perhaps we have been measuring strength incorrectly." Such conversations were occurring across the Alliance, as civilizations that had viewed each other with suspicion or contempt for centuries found common purpose and unexpected value in cooperation. Finally, after nearly a standard year of assessment, the custodians called for a formal convocation. Representatives from every Alliance world gathered once more on Proxima Centauri 4 to receive their judgment. Nexus appeared before the assembly, its crystalline form now familiar to many present. "The assessment of domain MW7 is complete," it announced. "Our findings have been integrated and analyzed according to Shaper protocols. The vast chamber fell silent as Alliance representatives awaited their fate. This domain has developed along unexpected pathways, Nexus continued. Deviations from baseline parameters have occurred repeatedly throughout your collective history. Periods of resource exploitation, species dominance, and technological misapplication have been identified. Mason exchanged a worried glance with Miller. This didn't sound promising. However, Nexus added, recent developments indicate an emergent self-correction capacity. The formation of your alliance represents a significant adaptation toward harmony and balanced advancement. Most notably, this adaptation occurred without external intervention, a phenomenon of particular interest to the Custodian Collective. Does this mean our development is considered acceptable? Mason asked carefully. It means your development is considered valuable, Nexus replied. The Shapers established parameters to guide evolution toward optimal outcomes. Your civilizations have demonstrated the ability to recognize suboptimal patterns and implement corrections independently. This represents a form of meta-evolution not anticipated in the original parameters. A ripple of cautious optimism spread through the assembly. The Custodian Collective has determined that Domain MW7 will continue without adjustment, Nexus announced. Moreover, we propose a modification to our standard protocols. Rather than periodic assessment from external observers, we offer integration, the establishment of a permanent custodian presence to serve as advisors and archivists for your continued development. Advisors, not overseers, Miller clarified. Correct. The distinction is meaningful. Your domain has demonstrated capacity for self-direction. Our role would be to provide context and historical perspective, not governance or control. The Alliance representatives conferred briefly before Mason responded. We are grateful for your favorable assessment and welcome the opportunity for continued exchange. The knowledge and perspective you offer would be invaluable to our development. Then it is established, Nexus confirmed. The Custodian Collective will maintain a presence in this domain, with exchanges of knowledge and technology as appropriate to your developmental stage. Primary custodian entities will depart, leaving specialized interfaces for ongoing communication. As the formalities concluded, a sense of profound relief spread throughout the gathered representatives. What had begun as a potential extinction-level threat had transformed into an unprecedented opportunity for advancement. In the aftermath of the Custodian Judgment, the United Galactic Alliance entered a new era of development. With access to the vast historical archives of the Custodians, Alliance civilizations gained insights into their own origins and the broader context of life throughout the universe. The knowledge that they were part of a grand experiment, one of hundreds of seeded galaxies, brought both humility and pride. Humility in recognizing how young even their oldest civilizations were in the cosmic timeline. Pride in having developed sufficiently to be deemed worthy of continuation. Perhaps most significantly, the crisis had cemented the new political order established after Earth's rebellion against the Senate's isolation decree. What might have eventually devolved back into competition and dominance had instead been forged into a genuine partnership by the shared experience of external judgment. 1 year after the Custodian assessment, Alliance representatives gathered on Earth for the formal establishment of a permanent council chamber. Unlike the hierarchical arrangement of the old Senate, the new chamber was designed as a perfect circle, with all representatives seated at equal distance from the center. As President Mason addressed the inaugural session, he reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. A little over 2 years ago, the Galactic Senate voted to isolate Earth for 50 years. He reminded the Assembly. That vote proved to be their last mistake, not because Earth retaliated with force, but because it catalyzed a transformation that was long overdue. He gestured to the chamber around them, where former enemies now sat as partners. Had we not been forced to reveal our hidden strengths, had we not taken control of the hyperspace junctions and demanded a more equitable system, We might never have been prepared for the custodian's arrival. Our disunity might have led to a very different assessment. Archduke Vex, now serving as the draconian representative to the council, inclined his head in acknowledgement. The former adversaries had developed an unlikely respect for each other through the challenges they had faced together. And now we look to the future, Mason continued. With the knowledge shared by the custodians, we understand better both our origins and our potential. We know that life throughout this galaxy, diverse as it is, shares common foundations laid by the Shapers billions of years ago. In a very real sense, we are all distant cousins, following different evolutionary paths from the same starting point. As Mason spoke, a crystalline structure in the center of the chamber pulsed with light, the permanent custodian interface, a living repository of knowledge and witness to the Alliance's continued development. The custodians have promised to share insights from other seeded galaxies, other experiments in the grand design of the Shapers. Mason concluded, what we learn may transform our understanding of life, intelligence, and our place in the universe. But whatever discoveries lie ahead, we will face them together, as equal partners in the greatest adventure our civilizations have ever known. Beyond the council chamber, in orbit around Earth, Admiral Bennett stood on the bridge of the Defiance. The ship had been recommissioned as the flagship of the Alliance's new exploration fleet, tasked with mapping the boundaries between seeded galaxies and establishing contact with other domains deemed worthy of continuation by the custodians. Course laid in, Admiral. Her first officer reported. The Andromeda coordination point awaits. Bennett nodded, gazing at the view screen where Earth grew smaller as they prepared to depart. 2 years ago, she had led a fleet in Earth's defense, revealing capabilities kept hidden for decades. Now she led a mission of discovery, with a crew comprised of species from across the Alliance. Engage Helios Drive, she commanded. Let's see what other experiments the Shapers have running. In a flash of golden light, the Defiance and its escort ships vanished from Earth orbit, bound for the space between galaxies where the custodians had established a nexus point. There, according to Nexus, representatives from other seeded domains would gather to share knowledge and experiences, a meta-experiment in cross-domain interaction that even the Shapers had not explicitly designed. As the ships entered the golden realm of Helios transit, Bennett reflected on the remarkable journey that had brought them here. What had begun with a punitive vote in the Galactic Senate had led, through conflict and cooperation, to humanity's full integration into a galactic community, now expanding beyond its original boundaries. The Senate's last mistake had indeed been their vote against Earth. But in a twist that no one could have predicted, that mistake had ultimately saved not just humanity, but possibly all civilizations in the Milky Way. For without the unified alliance that emerged from that conflict, the custodians' assessment might have ended very differently. The future that awaited beyond the golden light of Helios transit was unknown, but full of promise. And whatever challenges it held, they would face them together, no longer as ancient powers and newcomers, but as equal partners in a cosmic experiment, still unfolding after billions of years. Somewhere, perhaps in dimensions beyond human comprehension, the Shapers themselves might be watching with interest as their creation evolved in ways they had never anticipated. The ultimate success of an experiment designed to explore all possible patterns of life and intelligence in a universe of endless possibility.